Hello, everybody. Very good to have you with us. We've got quite a lot of talking to do because we're talking from different perspectives, but of course the central perspective is that we all love and want to push around music as much as possible. So thank you very much for being with us. Put your questions in the chat. Your videos are off. I'll say this now, Monday, 6 o'clock, I'm doing a thing all on my own, Ralph's favorite chords. And you can guess, we'll have a session of guessing which they are. But so I'll ask my colleagues here to guess as well. And then, anyway, we'll bang on we'll go on for about 3/4 of an hour, but do feed in your questions and we'll get them. And here we go. So first of all, may I introduce to you our guests, Ashley Stafford. I've known him for ages as a remarkable fellow who combines all manner of things, wonderful singing teaching, singing himself as a counter-tenor. He was a lay clerk at St. Paul's some years ago, for example, alto, conductor, but I know him as an osteopath, and he has magically cured me on a couple of occasions when I've done my back. So welcome, Ashley, and we'll give you the floor in a minute just to talk about what you do so that everybody knows. Some will know you from choral courses and things. Anna Lapwood has had an amazing impact on music just recently, particularly the Barkathon was an amazing 24 hours of Bach from organs and people all over the world. And trying to contact her during that time, very difficult indeed, because it was a massive amount of work. And what a wonderful thing to do. And in a moment, at the appropriate time, perhaps Anna can tell us all about that. Peter Allwood, not unrelated to me, is chairman of Friends of Cathedral Music. We go back a long way. We both sang in King's Choir under David Wilcox, and we both have run the music at wonderful schools. But he went on to do something which I didn't dare to do, which was to be a headmaster. And for 10 years, he was headmaster of Lichfield Cathedral School. And he's doing the valiant thing of helping rescue choirs cathedral choirs in difficulty, the Cathedral Choirs Emergency Fund. So hats off to you, Peter, for doing that. And in a minute, you take the stage and tell us about what you're doing. So why don't we have a question, first of all, and then I'll ask us all to take the stage. And those who are listening to what we're doing, feel free to ask questions and they'll be fed through to me. If we seem to ignore you for 20 minutes or more, do ask the question. It is being recorded, so I hope that's all right. So first of all, the thing to say, ask probably all of us, is have we reached virtual fatigue, or is there a lot more? Is there a lot more potential for what we can do virtually? Would you like to start off with that?
Oh, it's a good question. I think personally, I think I reached a sense of virtual fatigue quite recently, and I thought, well, what else is there that we can do? Because everyone has been working so hard in the last couple of months to keep putting things out. But I think actually what I've noticed is that it just means it's pushing people to be more and more innovative and keep coming up with new ways of engaging people virtually like this. And I think that's one of the brilliant things of lockdown, and I hope it's one of the positives that we're all going to take out of it, is ways in which we can all be engaging more as musicians with as many people as possible. So I don't think we've got there yet. I hope it doesn't happen.
Great. Ashley?
Although I think there are two aspects from my point of view. One is being on the receiving end of so much inventiveness and people who've taken the trouble and time to really get to grips with tricky technology and create fantastic broadcasts. I mean, Anna is obviously an obvious example, but groups like Divine Music and others who've really got to grips with this business of, you know, getting the filming right, getting the sound right, and are really expanding, if you like, another. It's like another stream of awareness for people. And whether they're reaching new people or not, I'm not sure about that, but they're certainly keeping the music going. There's also the next thing, the people who are somehow reaching the public live. So some friends and colleagues of mine, Laura Lamp and Miles Lallement, have been sponsored by a local estate agent to go around all the private, those big squares in Earl's Court where they have these lovely gardens, and they're giving evening concerts every week on a Thursday. And many people are coming out on their balconies to hear this live music, which it doesn't break any rules, but is taking place in gardens and outdoors. And so that this would not have happened under normal circumstances, because people think about venues, what church shall I go to, what shall I do, how do I manage this and that. So that's exciting.
That's a very good idea, Ashley. I think we should do that. And I've got a square a few yards from here, and I should go and sing to everybody.
There are opportunities for live music in the correct environments and not breaking rules.
Brilliant.
Even singing in groups. I mean, I have a theory, of course, which is probably will come up about this whole business of why choral groups are being sort of particularly harassed about whether we are spreading or would spread viral clumps when we sing. And I think you cut through all the difficulty and you say we sing without consonants.
That's a good idea.
And that way there is no
Very
we're
good.
not spreading anything. So all
Very
the
good.
plosives and the fricatives, which are the favourites of great choir masters the world over, will be banned. And
Absolutely.
we have to sing with vowels only.
I'll agree to
that'll
that.
solve the problem. Okay, but the third thing,
Peter?
is, my other bear with me, is the actual
Oh, sorry.
business of teaching. And it's been really interesting when people do not have performances to work for. So if you take away the stress of, or no, not the stress, the requirement or the demands of performance, it really does give people an opportunity to think about what singing is.
Thank you,
Singing as
Ashley.
an activity, and going back down on the, if you link into the inner quality of what it is to sing, as opposed to the business of how am I going to deliver the music, make people not disgrace the music or myself, or all those anxieties we all know as performers. And really great that I'd say a major tranche of my students have really got interested in the process, what we do as singers, rather than, of course, we're doing repertoire and stuff, but it's not geared towards the next singing opportunity. So that it's been a good opportunity to explore that without that external diary pressure, if you want to call it that. So that's my experience.
I'm glad to hear that.
Pretty positive.
Good to,
Peter?
that's good to hear. That's very, very good to hear, because it makes for such a change. I'm hoping that people have not lost an interest in the virtual world, because with our Cathedral Choirs Emergency Fund, we've got 3 projects going to come up over the next 5 weeks or so. And so I'm really hoping that there'll be lots of people out there who will want to tune in and see what people are up to. And as Anna was saying just now, it is actually causing people to be more innovative. And I'm sure there is a place for this. I'm sure that even if we find the vaccines and the treatment and everything else, and that all this COVID fear goes away, I just cannot imagine that we won't be left with a certain amount of the virtual world, because I think we gain from it as well. But of course, there is nothing to compare with that, with being in the place itself, is there? And being able to enjoy things in a live environment. Which is gorgeous, and we're all longing to get back to that as well. So let's hope that before long it's going to be possible.
Anna, I've got a question from someone. Could you ponder a little bit on reaching people who are more elderly through the virtual world?
Yeah, I've just seen that message. I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things I'm hoping is that now that we've been through this period where almost every ensemble and every person has had to go online in some form, that they will keep exploring ways to sort of fuse their real concerts with online concerts. Because I've certainly found, I mean, I've been running this NHS choir for 1,000 NHS staff from across the UK. And those people wouldn't normally be able to attend a choir because they have irregular shift patterns. They cannot confirm that they will always be able to attend a Thursday evening rehearsal. But you put it online and they can tune in from wherever they are. They can tune in on the ward if it's potentially a bit quieter than normal, or they can catch up afterwards. And I think that kind of thing is really exciting. And I've had a lot of them say that they hadn't been able to sing in the choir for 20 years and now they've come back to it and want to carry it on after lockdown. And I think those kinds of positives could definitely be taken to the more elderly as well.
And can I add to that, Ralph, that cathedrals have discovered that those tuning in to online services are in huge number. So whereas perhaps a choral evensong might have attracted 50 or 100 or 150 or whatever, there are thousands who are coming to listen online. And your own experience, Ralph, of the Rodolfus virtual choral evensong, how many people eventually heard that? 35,000, 40,000? Yeah. And not only heard, but saw. This is terrific. It's giving a huge number of people an opportunity to tune into something that they otherwise perhaps would not have been able to do, which is great. And that's very much the case for vulnerable and elderly.
And I think the thing that I see as a particular positive when it comes to the religious side of things is that I think perhaps some young people nowadays might feel reluctant to actually step into a chapel and make that, or a church or cathedral, and make that leap. Whereas being able to do it anonymously online, where no one can really see that they're there if they don't want them to, it allows them to kind of just take that leap that could then push them into going to services more regularly.
It means you can go to evensong in your pajamas, doesn't it?
I've done that quite a lot.
In the organ loft.
And we at choralevensong.org, which is an amazing organisation where you can put your postcode in and it tells you the next choral evensong to you, are really interested in this because of the amount that choral evensong has become more popular just recently. Peter, can I ask you to sum up where we are with the whole business of banning singing and whether we'll be allowed to sing? It's one of the questions that we got and you offered to answer it, and I just think none of us really know, and we can bang on for ages about it, but let's just know where we are at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Publicly, through politicians and statements from politicians, essentially singing is currently banned in numbers in any.
Oliver Cromwell.
Yes, that is public, but behind the scenes, and what's going on behind the scenes, we should feel much more encouraged by. Whereas when they were first talking, for instance, with churches, which is particularly what I know about here, where they were talking about churches opening, but there would be no singing, even though that is still being said publicly, that is actually not the case in the background. And the discussions are much more nuanced, much more subtle altogether. There was a question in the Commons, I think it was yesterday, from the MP for Lichfield, asking when will they be able to sing in this wonderful cathedral that he was next door to. And the answer came back from a minister, they will not be able to because it's banned. So that is what people are hearing publicly. And that is unfortunate. It almost reaffirms this negative, in fact, when the questions are asked, when they aren't able to respond in a more positive way. But what's happening is that it is being very carefully discussed. There's scientific work being undertaken almost as we speak in various locations around the country that are heavily protected, with some professional singers. And if those go to plan and they prove for there to be safety, and I hope that they take Ashley's advice and make sure that during the tests they use no consonants at all, and sing a bit of Delius for a summer's night or something, then they will take it into one of our big, large buildings as well, and they'll be experimenting with that. And hopefully they will learn what is obvious to all of us, that if you put 10 people spaced 5 meters apart inside a large cathedral, that there is nobody that is possibly going to catch anything from you under any circumstances whatsoever. So just common sense needs to come into this, but it's taking a long time to persuade the people who put themselves on a pedestal and said, it's bad for you. And please, to everybody listening today, don't believe all the anecdotes that you've heard, you know, from America, from Germany, from here and there, of choir rehearsals in large numbers, singing being bad for you. Because it's just as possible that the bad for you has come from sharing refreshments and kissing and hugging each other in the way that all we singers love to do whenever we meet one another, and quite right too. But just as likely that it came from that, and that the singing itself is not harmful, but we just don't know. And they're doing the research as fast as they can and trying to come out with a sensible answer. Meanwhile, we all hope for the best.
Thank you, Peter. Anna, could you, there was a question from Richard Gowers, which you were going to answer. So could you pose the question and then answer it?
Yes, I can.
And could you please also tell us about a little bit about the amazing Barkathon and your NHS choir and anything else you've been doing, because you've been as active as anyone.
But maybe I'll start with the Bark in that case, because it's probably easier. So yeah, we ran this event at the beginning of this week, which was the complete organ works in 24 hours. And it's something we've done every year now since I started at Pembroke in 2017. So it's the 4th time we've done it. And normally, obviously, we have all of the organists in the chapel. We tend to have about 20 organists probably, and some of the pieces have to be sight read at 3 in the morning, and so some of them are slightly more successful than others, whereas this year we had 60 organists from all over the world. We had David Good, we had some of the best organists, David Briggs, Sebastian Heindel, Cameron Carpenter, really sort of the top names of the organ world, all playing for this event. And it was all raising money for some work that I do in Zambia every year. So we work with rural communities teaching music, and those communities are now suffering really quite heavily from the pandemic, because it's taken away all of their income and they don't really have a buffer. So essentially what we were doing was trying to raise some money to provide food and PPE, and we managed to raise £7,500, which was really exciting. But it was an absolute nightmare from a technology perspective, hence why I didn't reply to any of your emails, Ralph, sorry.
No, please,
trying to edit together all of these videos into 6 4-hour videos. I had no idea that a computer can make the noises that my computer was making while I was trying to do this. And we had all sorts of problems, like Facebook blocking our audio at 1 in the morning and having to re-upload the audio at 2:40. And so it was an adventure.
Bad influence on the young.
Yes, exactly. But we got there, and yeah, so that was wonderful. Richard's question was, does he think it's harder to get into, does he think because it's harder to get into a career in music now, we have less time to actually focus on real music making? So saying that any musician will have to spend so much time putting out virtual content and being their own manager and doing admin, that actually they don't have so much time to spend on the music. And I think it's a really good point. I mean, I think all of us here probably spends vast hours every day on our emails and on various different social media sites, because that's sort of the way of life now. And I think it's about trying to integrate it into what you do, and not let it take over, I guess. Yes. I think it is quite easy to let it take over.
I'd love everyone to remember, though, that I call my emails work. They're just the way that work comes. And I much prefer them coming in this form than in the old days, where you used to get huge piles of paper every morning. People would write, you'd have to throw half of them away. And it's far preferable. Anyway, that's another matter. Well, I suppose it's
you mean you
virtual.
don't throw your emails away?
Oh, yes, you just go and they're gone. Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. Ashley, would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you do, osteopathy and everything?
Well, I just wanted to pick up on something Anna said in
Please do.
response about Richard's question, because I think it's so interesting in terms of musical education where you are at the point in which you want to launch a career musically, because if you are immersed in music from an early age, and it doesn't have to just be one style of music, it could be broad spectrum of music or one more focused. But if you are immersed in that, when you get to the point of wanting to launch your career, yes, you've always got more to learn, but you're coming from a sound foundation. You're coming from an awareness of how it is and what musicianship and musicality, you are living it. You're not learning it, you're living it. And whereas it's always advantageous to have more time to live it and therefore incorporate it into your personality in performance, you do have the foundation there, and you can build on that on an ongoing basis. The problem now, I feel, and I think everybody probably on the screen would entirely, I would think, endorse this, is that people, it's becoming rarer to come across the, let's call it the undergraduate or the postgraduate, even, who has got that immersion, who is actually not confused by the music on the page, even, you know, the sense of automatic sense of style that you've absorbed through your pores and your upbringing, when you know that to sing blow is a different thing from Dyson, unless of course you're Barry Rose, when of course it's exactly the same, and it's all Stanford anyway. But I do feel that, you know, he's right. It is important that we should do that. And I do think that building a career now is particularly difficult. I mean, people I know who've just literally launched a career and were doing really quite well, springboarded off, you know, the high board, and then find that somebody's taken the water out of the swimming pool. And this right now is the situation that a number of young singers find themselves in. And they've got to get some wings somehow, or a parachute. But yeah. I mean, it's a very personal feeling about that. This feeling of being immersed in music, it doesn't go away.
Right. Thank you, Ashley. Peter, one of the questions was, is there a danger that the cathedral chapters could pass on the money to other things and not use it? The stuff that has been carefully raised by the Cathedral Choir's Emergency Fund could be diverted to other needs.
There's no chance at all that that money raised for the Cathedral Choir's Emergency Fund will be used for anything other than music, because there will be a stipulation when the money is given to cathedrals that we have assurance that that is spent on the music. However, I mean, there could be a danger that we give the money, and that money that the cathedrals were going to give to the music that themselves, that they then divert elsewhere, I suppose. I'm really not. I think there's another question perhaps which might be important, and that is that if cathedrals are not receiving any funding and not receiving any assistance, would there be a danger that our music, that choral foundations are going to have the funding removed in order that the cathedrals can fund other important aspects of what they do? And who knows the way in which the cathedrals will organize their finances. They'll all be different. But the fact is that cathedrals during this pandemic are losing staggering amounts of income. And the true facts of that are not yet known. But there is work going on to work it out, and we should know within the next month or so of what it is that they expect to have lost. And it is huge sums of money. And I am massively encouraged in all of the conversations that we are having with cathedrals that so many of them are saying that their music is too precious to lose, and so that they are putting their funds, they are making their music a priority in the way in which they spend the money that they have got.
Peter, can I ask you something that's just occurred to me, particularly of interest to this audience? There are some wonderful opportunities for gap years for young singers in cathedrals, where you can go and learn the repertoire and learn the ropes, meet new friends, sing even song every day, get your sight reading better and all that. Do you think there will be more opportunities for young people to do this as a result of it? Because possibly the cathedrals will have cut down on their paid singers, provided that they can get younger singers to do it. And I mean this in a positive way. Obviously, we don't want them to cut down. However,
sure. I think it is possible, Ralph. Yes, and I think it is. I think that it is distinctly possible that some will find that that's the way that they need to work and would like to work. And Anna might be able to tell us as well about organists, and that there may be more places for organ scholars as a result, where maybe a third organist can't be appointed. But we hope that both these things will be possible. We would hope that one would not happen at the expense of another. I mean, my previous point, there are, even with all the positive things that I'm talking about, there are a number of cathedrals where such are the funding pressures that even though they might wish to keep all of their employed musicians on, they are really struggling, and that they may well have to free up some of their finances in order to make it possible. And so some of these choirs are under threat. There's no doubt about that at all. But we're hoping that through all the various agencies, and the Cathedral Choirs Emergency Fund is one, but there are other agencies as well that are coming into the story here, and that we're hoping that between us all, we can sustain all of the cathedral choirs for long enough to enable them all to take stock, see what they might be able to do in getting their income back, and then see whether or not they can last the course.
I'll tell you something that there are quite a lot of people listening to this who would have come on choral courses. And something I say make sure I say to each course at the end is, look, all of us love music, particularly here, choral music. Some of us will go into it. Some of us will have a career with it. Some of us will be organists. Some of us will carry on doing it and listening to it and loving it, but we'll get jobs as in business or something like this. You can still contribute when you're in business. Please remember this for 40 years' time, and give back. You know, and I know that loads are. I know individuals who give a huge amount, who I knew from choral courses, and absolutely love choral singing. And I'm sure they've given to your fund as well, Peter, right now.
And if they're online today, thank you very much, because we really, really, really appreciate it, which is great. Ralph, you were asking particularly about places for choral scholars, and I could just say that a really fantastic example of what choral scholars can do. They're a group in the Southwest, based essentially in Truro and Exeter, but 8 other cathedrals, I think, involved as well, that are putting on a virtual choral evensong, I'm sure inspired by the Rodolfus one. But it's all choral scholars, and they are organizing the whole thing, they are editing the whole thing, they're doing it all themselves, but bringing in 1 or 2 celebrities in the readings and so on. And that should be out by the end of July. So if any of the current listeners want to see what some of our wonderful choral scholars can do, then do look out for it.
Just probably 2 more questions before we open it further to the floor. And I think we've been answering most questions as we go along. If you feel we haven't answered your question, please don't hesitate to ask it again, just in case we've missed it as a banner. is about well-being, which in a minute I'll ask Ashley. Another is, somebody says it seems that fewer and fewer younger children are willing to join choirs. It's not my impression. I think that plenty are, but then the opportunity in some schools is drying up, and which is a great shame. We should be using the opportunity of the flexibility in education to be able to give them things like singing. What do you think, Anna?
I don't think I've seen fewer children joining choirs at all. But then again, I realise I live in Cambridge, and we're dealing with a certain group of children and a certain group of parents, and they are surrounded by all these opportunities to make choral music the whole time. I mean, there's quite a lot of choice in Cambridge. But no, in general, I think that people still seem enthusiastic, and I think that teachers and schools are being extremely resourceful in trying to find ways. I mean, I did a workshop with this amazing school back last summer where they brought their primary school choir, and they had 50 kids singing in 4-part harmony, and all under the age of 11. And I was totally blown away by it. It was interesting because I think out of 50 kids, they had one boy. And that wasn't through lack of trying. That was just because that's how it worked out in that school. And actually, the director of music in the school and I had a long chat about it. And he said that he had set up a separate boys' choir to try and encourage the boys in that school to think that singing was something that they could do. And I think it's an interesting reversal to how we usually see it, where there are all these opportunities for boys and fewer for girls. Actually, in schools, it can be the opposite.
Yeah. That's actually quite interesting in respect of what Robert Breisman has achieved with Libera, which I know, Ralph, you're familiar with.
Libera is amazing.
And they
Boys' choir.
audition around South London schools. Robert goes around South London schools auditioning, and he does maintain that there's a couple of reasons that outside of the choral foundations, boys, just as Anna has just suggested, are less willing to come forward, but they are very keen when they get the right opportunities. And you get some amazing young boys singers, and basically they're all very enthusiastic. But the other thing he says, to at a certain level, mixing the boys and the girls, it doesn't really work, and you've got to sort of be careful about how you manage that without saying it's all about boys. But in his case, that is the case. But the other great thing about that choir is that when the boys' voices start to change, they are further encouraged. They do not leave that group unless they have some reason want to. And they carry on singing through the break. I'm teaching a couple of the youngsters who I taught as trebles now, and they're turning into amazing young tenors. 2 were going to come this year, actually, Ralph, 2 young tenors, 2 various courses. And this is, and even building up through the late teens into early 20s, he supports them amazingly. And because it's linked to church, they have opportunities every week to sing together. They've got this unity of purpose and experience that they've shared over many years. It's quite remarkable. And this is all just South London. Good old South London, not Cambridge, not Oxford, not a cathedral in sight,
Well, in Pembroke Musical Foundation, I'm very proud that today, it's only been going for 5 years, Pembroke Musical Foundation, and we've got equal numbers of boys and girls, not through pushing either way, we just have, and equal numbers of enthusiasts coming forward. And one of the singing teachers called me today and said, what am I going to do? A boy who's a treble, his voice is changing. So it's our first changing voice problem. And he's so upset to be losing his voice. And I thought, right, that's so nice we've reached there. And we're going to pass him on to Inner Voices, which is the comprehensive school teenage choir that I run nearby. And he'll go to that. But anyway, you reminded me of that, the disappointment of losing your voice.
Can I just pick up on something Ashley said really quickly? Because I think it is a really interesting thing to talk about, having space for single-sex choirs, because I think nowadays we can be quite reluctant to preserve those spaces and think, well, why should we? It should be all equal, everyone should have equal opportunity, which I think is, I understand the sort of logic behind it. But at the same time, I've seen it from both sides, how positive a boys' choir can be, how positive a girls' choir can be. I mean, I love working with the Pembroke girls every week, and I love the fact that they feel it's a sort of safe space where they can chat about everything they want to chat about. And it's girls age 11 talking to girls age 18. And I think that having those single-sex spaces for such a wide age group to interact is something that is so rare and you only really get with choral music. And so I think it's something that we all have to strive to preserve as long as we can.
Bravo, Anna, that's really great.
Thank you. That's right. By the way, there are opportunities for Rodolfus people to do some outreach and learn how to do it and be involved. And you only have to ask. And please, those who are listening, remember, you only have to ask. If you want help with gap opportunities, if you want help with doing this kind of outreach, lots of people who've been on courses then go and help with outreach efforts. And so do please ask us if you would like to. Moving on to another question, a lot is said about well-being and how people are feeling as a result of lockdown, and people who are lonely and depressed and have people there with who are argumentative and all that. Have you any advice to give about that, Ashley?
Well, not direct advice. My experience, I can only really speak from experience. I wouldn't speak from any kind of put myself on a pedestal of science, knowledge or psychology. But my experience of my individual students has been, and my age range is quite wide, from about, well, I don't count the boys in the moment, but it is from about 8 till 80, so it's quite a wide range. And the challenge has been different across the age groups. The younger, the mid-teens to early 20s, have really suffered from this lack of socializing in the way that they would be used to doing. And for them to be having their weekly hourly session with me, even though it's online, seems to have been very, very valuable from that point of view. And the same would go for the older segment, some of them who've had to shield and been without any kind of personal contact outside of their flat or house for a long time. And that active, it's not just I'm having a chat with a mate or something, it's activity which would involve putting yourself back in touch with your body, realizing that you've got this inner and this outer relationship to the world still through the activity of your breath and your body, feeling it, being present to yourself is incredibly rewarding and supportive for them. And singing is such a great vehicle without being directly psychotherapeutic or whatever. In the middle range, you've got people who are still working at home and they have children and they find it very, very challenging to juggle space for themselves, because somehow the work, what a surprise, seems to have expanded to fill the space available. So people working from home seem to be doing more hours. They started off with this great idea, I don't have to travel anymore so I can walk the dog. But funnily enough, the work's expanded. So those people also are benefiting from the specific time that they set aside to be with themselves. They're singing, the music, and all the benefits we know that entails. So it is different across the age groups, but it's definitely been proved that engaging with yourself and your voice through breath, work, sound, and music is absolutely been a lifeline for many people. And I won't go to individual cases, it'd be the wrong thing to do.
Peter, thank you, Ashley. Peter, having been a headmaster and as well as director of music, can you see, particularly for younger children, any continuation of what we've been doing at home with younger children, and well, with all children, with all schools, with them being at home for education some of the time? Or do you think people long to be together all week?
I think that they do love the interaction with each other. And I think that they gain so much from that interaction. But I mean, all children are different, Ralph, and there are some who've just been dying to get back into school, to see their friends, to feel enlivened by it, and then will learn so much better. And there are others who love the quietness and the gentleness of being able to do things at their own pace. And we have to think particularly of those children who have had the right sort of technology at home, to be able to interact with their teachers. They have to have the right schools nearby who've been prepared to interact in the right way, and parents who have felt comfortable with engaging with the education. And it's differed so much for so many. Where the setup is right, where they've got the technology, where they've got the space, where they've got the support of parents, where the balance can be found and they can play at home, and I mean play in all sorts of ways and for all age ranges, as well as learning, then of course, it's lovely for them. But I think we have to just think of some who have had no idea whilst they've been at home, have just not had the right equipment, not had the right support, not had the right atmosphere necessarily as well. And I think we feel desperately sorry for those children and would wish them to be able to get back to their schools and be able to interact and get the security of that. And so I wouldn't really like to generalize at all. Over choirs, I mean, within the cathedral world, we've been hugely worried about those choristers who are in their last year, and are missing the opportunity of working with their wonderful directors of music. Directors of music in cathedrals might work with their choristers for as much as 2 hours a day. So they become their major teacher. They are with that person more than any other. And I think that this sudden lockdown, I think a large number of them have had a tremendous sense of loss over this. And where the director of music is furloughed and therefore even unable to work online with the choristers, I think those particularly in their last year might feel completely disenfranchised and leave without really feeling that attachment, which so many of the people listening today will have had that experience as a chorister, enjoyed it, gone on to the next piece of singing, and now perhaps be of choral scholar age and wanting to participate. But I just fear that those from this year who are leaving may not have had that same affirmation of that experience that will mean that in however many years' time it is, that they are wanting to engage again as choral scholars. And I would find that incredibly sad. And personally, I've been on to cathedrals saying, please, when the furlough system goes into part-time mode in July, you're allowed to part-time furlough. If you haven't already, get that director of music on back, even for 10%, 20% of the time. Let them engage with the choristers for even the last 2 or 3 weeks of the summer term. And there will at least be some sense of affirmation of what they've done. And I just think, that would be so good if they can do so. Yeah.
Peter mentioned about the technology, and I think many directors of music in Cambridge certainly have actually been quite surprised at the number of people who simply don't have fast enough internet to connect and do something. I mean, like we're doing now, that actually requires quite good internet and upload speed. And I've found in my choir, my chapel choir, that a lot of them, their computers aren't fast enough, their internet isn't fast enough. And I think it does highlight, this kind of situation does highlight the disparity of who can access this kind of thing. But also what I've found really interesting is with our girls choir, we've got one girl who's homeschooled, and she's 15 now. She's been homeschooled all the way through. And she was the one who sent me an email and said, I'm desperate for choir to restart again, because for her, it's her only interaction with other children her own age. And it's that kind of person that I really feel for in lockdown, because they are suddenly completely ripped away from everything, and it's their only kind of support network.
Yeah, Ralph, it's Helen Williams put a chat earlier on, third chat, which was that we have to remember that not everyone can go online, and not everyone has the infrastructure. And so there's a huge, we must never generalize about these things, because what people have at home differs so much. And somebody else here just saying about Zoom teaching being enhanced beyond voice and violin that are being successfully taught. I'm sure that's the case. We've heard of some tremendously fine teaching going on online. So where the circumstances are right, it can be absolutely wonderful and very good.
And I expect quite a few of our audience have found themselves looking after younger children far more than they used to, and looking after old people. And old people often haven't got the computers either. That was pointed out too, wasn't it?
It was.
But I wonder whether that's going to get better, and there are going to be more people connected.
I'm sure.
Just before we come to a close, has anyone noticed any questions which I haven't noticed? I've just been through them. I think we've covered everything. Do feel free to say. Before asking the final question of everyone, I'll just advertise my session on Monday, which is 20 minutes of my favorite chords. And I'm going to give you two of I'm going to give you, Peter, you'll probably know them all.
A lot of them are already, yeah.
Yeah, I think you will. But I'm going to give you to you a lot, and not to give them away what they are. But
Stumm.
That one.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Isn't that wonderful, that piece?
I know the exact point, yeah.
And another one is this. And Anna has come across that recently. So anyway, that's just two of them, but there are about 6 different. And I'm going to make it into a kind of harmony lesson for everybody. So I won't just bang on about these chords. I will, I think, enable you to understand what they are.
And that same chord, Ralph, you second one did, comes into another context as well. I'll tell you about it later. The same chord, but in a different context.
Oh, go on, say it now.
It's at the beginning of I Was Glad.
Oh, yes, yes. Except down a semitone in that was in D flat. Yes, good. But a completely different context.
Completely different context, yeah.
And yes, and Neapolitans are very much liked in the Allwood household, but that's another point.
This is a lovely insight into your childhood, by the way.
Well, let me tell you that whenever a Neapolitan 6 happened at home, Dad would yell. Dad, who was a scientist and mathematician, would yell, Neapolitan! Because everybody had to come and listen. Anyway, I just wanted to say one last thing, if there's nothing from anyone else, and that is, we hear lots of people saying, oh yes, how are we going to cope as we come out of lockdown? How are we going to gradually, okay, that's one problem and we must address it carefully. But I'd like to ask, in the long run, what musically good will have come out of lockdown? Because the audience listening to us are going to be operating it more than we older people are. And you're slightly older, Anna. And so I think it's really important what we've learned and what we're doing, that we preserve the best of it. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely and utterly right. I think it will be preserved. I don't think we'll have to work at it. I think we'll find that we have that natural adoption. And of course, lockdown is just not suddenly coming to an end. And choirs are not going to suddenly start singing again. This is a gradual process, and so there's going to be a necessary overlap through all of these things, and therefore I think that we will not lose a lot, and I think there are lots of opportunities. I mean, what about getting your choirs together, Anna, and saying to them in advance, come with the following things learnt, and if you are able to work at that online, or you've provided it for them online, like we used to send tapes around to people, all of that sort of thing is going to be possible, isn't it? And maybe people can turn up to rehearsals with rather less work to do.
But Peter, can't we insist that our choirs put all of their parts together online, so that then we just turn up to the final rehearsal?
Yeah, again, depending on the quality of the choir and the nature of the singers and so on. But yeah, with that's possible. Different types of choir need a different amount of interaction and inspiration.
But
Ashley,
I think oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Anna. Then go on, Anna. What would you like to preserve?
Well, I think that raises an interesting point, in that the thing that I feel I've learned most in lockdown is that I should cherish the rehearsal process much more, because at the beginning of lockdown, everything seemed kind of performance orientated. It was about trying to put something out, put a virtual choir thing out. And as I said to some of you earlier, that actually my students found that very stressful, because they suddenly were watching themselves sing on the screen, and they didn't like it. Whereas it's the rehearsals where it usually will provide them with the confidence to enjoy the performance. And I think that lockdown has reminded me that I need to take that time more in our normal lives to really make sure that they can enjoy the finished product as much as possible.
I couldn't endorse that more. I think that is such a vital thing, particularly with the singers who actually are quite good at sight reading and actually have achieved quite a high level of expertise. They all think, right, I've got the notes right, let's go on with the performance. And this goes back to Richard Gower's, I think that's a point about musicianship. If it's all about how quickly can you get to the performance and knock it out, where's the music? And for me, in my, and I will say long and quite vast choral experience of all kinds, it was always coming out of a rehearsal that was so exciting. You think, God, that was a great rehearsal. When's the next time? Do that. And then you're really learning. So, Roger Norrington, Johnny Gardner, amazing at rehearsing and bringing music to life in a way you've never thought before. So you come out with so inspired. And when you do the performance, the real moment is at the end, they realize you're sharing some massive experience you've been through. It's not just sharing the music, it's sharing the experience of making and participating and learning and exploring those experiences, which you then share. They get all of that. But if people don't like rehearsals, something's seriously wrong. Either with the wrong director or them.
Absolutely. What a waste of music not to enjoy the rehearsals.
Yes, yes. And Ralph, you're just an epitome of somebody who inspires people in rehearsal. And that's it. It's just great. The joy, that connection to the joy, the emotional commitment that you bring out of people, and that's why they love it. The music's a vehicle, and the music has an end in itself, but that personal commitment from you and to them, for the joy, bang on. What else is there if you come down to it,
Because Ashley, you were saying earlier that was one of the really the wonderful things that you've been able to do with your singing pupils, is just spend time with the music itself and with the whole process of singing instead of the performance and
I'm going to do this next week. Can we get
and all that sort of thing. Instead, just enjoying the process and enjoying the whole feel of it. And lovely.
One final commercial that I forgot about is that Anita Morrison has put a thing on the Rodolfus Foundation website about breathing, and I've just watched it. It is absolutely superb. She talks about the two different parts of the breath down here, and the one up here, but does it with a skeleton whom she calls Hugo, and she demonstrates precisely what goes on. Everyone should look at it and work out, and you'll find yourself breathing far better after it. So various videos like that will gradually go up on the Rodolfus. Lots of them are up already. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for those who came to listen and watch. And thank you, Peter, Ashley, and Anna, very much indeed.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thanks, Ralph.
Zoom wave.
Zoom wave.